Hello and welcome to the Pod Awakens, a Star Wars fan podcast. My name is Jordan. With me today is Chris. No Ron tonight due to some scheduling issues, but we are here talking about Ahsoka Part 5, which is called Shadow Warrior, written by Dave Filoni, directed by Dave Filoni, and it aired September 12th, 2023 on Disney+. The official synopsis on the app is Ahsoka confronts her past while Hera and her allies undertake a rescue mission. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. We have an excellent episode to talk about, and I had plenty of time to really think about it and digest what we just saw. So I think this should be a good show. I really wish Ron was here because, boy, is this his episode or what?
Yeah. And I thought we were gonna. You know what? I actually thought we were going to see a character he's been wanting to see, and that was Maul, but we did not. Got close to it. Got close to Maul. I'll explain that for anybody that has not watched the Clone Wars and what exactly I meant by that. But overall, let's start with just your general thoughts on this episode and what it made you I guess feel or what were your you know um before we dive into full moments and stuff, just generally episode 5. How's it feel?
I thought it felt awesome. The Force is so cool in the show. I think it's used in ways that I've never really seen before. I thought when you have the kid sitting out there looking at the water, hearing the lightsabers. I was like, how is that even possible? That's incredible. And then you had Hu Yang in the beginning going, I told them to stay together. They never listen. It was just, and Hera, this is a great Hera episode. Fantastic Hera episode. And I mean, Hayden Christensen, man, this was a very compelling, awesome performance. And I think life has riched up his acting and his ability to put weight into the Anakin character. I think growing up has given him some gravitas as Anakin.
Yeah, I mean, I think he always could have been Anakin. I think the issue really was more with the writing of the prequels, which I like the prequels. I grew up with the prequels, but I can kind of tell, I can kind of see why people don't buy into them as much with them being, you know, maybe not as well written is maybe the way I would say it, right? But and it really struggled in that department with Anakin. And I think the way he wanted to play him, I think I've read somewhere or listened to something before where with Anakin, what they were really trying to do, and what I think Hayden was trying to do here, was to to emulate the Darth Vader voice. What I mean by that is if you listen to how he speaks when he is speaking to um as Anakin at times, if you put a Darth Vader filter on it, it's matching Darth Vader's cadence at times. So I think for some people that makes it seem like he's delivering lines at a different way, and they're like, why is he saying it like that? Well, if you put like a Darth Vader voice on it, it's that measured, sometimes spaces between uh spaces between words that are making the sentence longer. You're like, why does he sound like that? Well, it's because of the way he was trying to deliver it and match Darth Vader's voice, because this guy has to be consistent, right? Like at some point we have to think that this guy became Vader, and not just he's going to start speaking differently, right? When he's Vader. In this, it felt like he was really channeling the Matt Lanter voice of Anakin, which is from the Clone Wars, and he delivered that perfectly the way he needed to deliver it. Um, I guess my overall thoughts on the episode as a whole here was just I really enjoyed it. Um, I guess it didn't move me the way it moved other people, where they were saying like they've cried or it really hit them. I didn't feel that. So not to like diminish their thoughts on that, but just for me, I was just having fun watching it. But it didn't, even as somebody that watched all those shows, it didn't hit me that way. And I am a huge Star Wars fan, so I guess sometimes I'm confused when people are feeling that and I'm not, because I actually don't think I've teared up at any Star Wars moment in my life. I think the closest I did is when we were talking about those books, and I talked about R5 like purposely blowing his gasket so that way R2 could go in that book I was reading. But like usually the way I think of Star Wars is I don't think of it sometimes as being that deep. And I don't mean like I'm trying to parse my words correctly here.
You don't mean it's shallow. You mean that it's not diving into the depth of that emotion.
Yeah, a lot of times these stories don't, right? Like I feel like if you watch episodes 4, 5, and 6, you have a nice story, but I don't think there's anything there that would like move me emotionally. I think if I try to read into it, I can when I start thinking about maybe Vader sacrificing himself for his kid and stuff. But so that didn't really move me that way. I see all this stuff as almost a myth, right? Which is what it's based off of, like the mythological hero's journey,
It's an old legend.
right? And those type of stories never really make me feel that way. So uh, I do think this was probably the best episode of the show. I still put last week's at high regard as well, but this one got more into the characters, and I liked the way that they handled the world between worlds in this because let's face it, a lot of fake leakers were trying to pass off that this is going to be like her walking through alternate timelines, seeing her. This is what they were saying, seeing her fight Anakin in Episode 3 and what that would have done, or you know, uh, other moments in Star Wars history if like she had never left the Jedi Order, stuff like that. Thankfully, they didn't go that way. The way that they went with it is the way I think they needed to go with it. There's moments here where she's talking about how she was raised to be a soldier, which is not the typical Jedi way. And I think that's making her think that she's been approaching this Sabine stuff completely wrong. Completely wrong. And what we see on the other side of this is what fans have dubbed Ahsoka the White. And I'm going to bring up the photo of what this is referring to here in a moment. But it's, of course, a reference to Gandalf the White. And Dave Filoni is a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, right? Like, who isn't, right? Some people aren't, but I mean, like, when you're usually in this nerdy sphere, you're usually reading Tolkien or watching this stuff. And in Lord of the Rings, if people do not know, Gandalf was dressed in gray, and he is now, once he dies, right, becomes Gandalf the White, and he's more powerful, and he's, more like that. Well, here's Ahsoka. Most of the time, we've seen her in gray.
Mm-hmm.
This is how she approaches life after this experience in the world between worlds. And people have been calling her Ahsoka the White since the Rebels finale because this, even with Gandalf's staff here, is what she usually looked like at the end of Rebels. Now, what they've kind of done is they kind of shifted that scene because that was the scene where she gets Sabine and they leave Lothal and they go on this journey to find Ezra. What
So
they've
is that retcon that I keep hearing about?
The what?
That
Yeah,
retcon. I
maybe.
keep hearing this big retcon from Rebels, and I wasn't quite sure about it because I never watched
It's
Rebels.
yeah, it's probably that in that moment she was Ahsoka the White, but what they've kind of done here is they've kind of shifted this to being her wake up call, right? This is the moment. Her going through and experiencing this with Anakin and going through moments in her past that kind of showed that maybe she was taking too much from her training and kind of even figuring out that, she's been kind of distant with the Jedi, right? She keeps telling Huang she's not a Jedi. And I think she leaves this thinking she is a Jedi. And I think that's what the Ahsoka the White is. She's waking up. She's realizing she's more with the light side of the Force again. She's wearing white. She is associating herself with the Jedi again instead of the gray, which was this moral ambiguity of I'm not dark side, I'm not a Jedi, I am Ahsoka. So that's what I've kind of gotten from this, and I could be completely wrong when we get down to it, but that is what I think is so fascinating about this. And like I said, it didn't move me to tears or anything, but it was this moment to see her wake up. She was smiling more, Chris. She wasn't as
Hmm.
stoic as she used to be. And that is exactly what I've been wanting to see.
She got in touch with her younger self. And I think you were talking about how you weren't moved to tears, and neither was I. But what I think we're talking about here is Star Wars does a really good thing with symbolism and metaphor, but they don't really say, "Oh, look what I did there with this symbolism and this metaphor." They just kind of lay it out there, and you can interpret it however you really want to. I think one of the things that was so incredible about this episode was Occam's razor kind of wins again. The simplest answer was the simplest answer when we're talking about the world between worlds and what happened with Anakin and and Ahsoka. And I think this shows an incredible maturity, and it was a powerful moment. But I would agree with you, it wasn't a moment that would bring me to tears. It's actually a moment that kind of gets me fist pumping in the air, ready to go. And I think that's what Star Wars is. It's a story about a
Yes.
rebellion. It's a story about fighting the good fight. And I
That's
and
how I kind of felt, Chris. It felt like this
yeah.
moment of like me cheering, like she's awake. Let's go. She's gonna come out the other side of this. And
Hmm.
I guess one thing I want to ask of you, because I know like Ron brought this up in our group chat, we were going to cover it on here, because I think you and I might be on the same path here. I think he was leaning maybe the other way, but was it really the world between worlds, or was it in her head? Right? Because we kind of get, I feel like different messaging here, right? Through different things. So I just want to ask you: do you think this all really happened, or was she just on the verge of death?
Okay, so I think it makes the most sense just Verge of Death. The reason why it is ambiguous enough where that is possible is, for example, Anakin said when she said, "I will not fight you." Anakin said, "I've heard that before." Now, obviously, he heard that as Darth Vader, uh, but there were memories for Anakin that weren't necessarily Ahsoka's. So that's the only explanation I could give you for it really happened. But for the story beat, one way or the other, she basically was on the edge of death and she chose to live and come back to the light.
Yeah, so the way I read this is it did actually happen, right? Now, I know like some people say, well, the world between world looks a little different in this. There's not those portals and stuff. But the world between worlds doesn't mean I wouldn't think it doesn't have to show up the same way each time, in my opinion. And it essentially does what it needs to do to convince Ahsoka to do certain things, right? So like it does pull her into those portal moments. It pulls her into moments that, you know, I mean, this, which is the clones, and this is their first mission, which I believe is Christophus, which is what the Clone Wars movie based off of before they started the show, and this is like, uh, it's pulling her into moments, and like you said, Anakin being able to say up front, "I've heard that before," possibly referring to Luke, which we don't think Ahsoka knows about. Which means to me, it's Anakin. It's Force Ghost Anakin here. Um,
Yep.
the fact that also Jason hears the sabers in the waves makes me think again that this is happening. Now, what I mean by happening can be different for each
So
person,
for
I
me,
guess.
it happened. To me, it's all connected to the Force. So
Yes. Yeah.
Jason can hear it because it's connected to the Force. That does not necessarily mean that Anakin is really there. But yeah, I kind of like what you're saying. I think it's ambiguous enough that all that really matters in terms of the story beat is that Ahsoka got pulled into those memories and she used it to basically bring herself back.
Yes. Yes. I do think again it was the actual embodiment of him, because I think there's stuff that he wouldn't that he would know that she wouldn't know. So I that's where I lean that way. But
It was also very truthful of Anakin. It was also truthful. It was he wasn't hiding really the fact that he's both Anakin and Darth. He was both of them in this moment. And you see them flickering back between Darth
yes,
and
really great.
that was fantastic. And I really wonder maybe the portals maybe they didn't have windows and they realized it differently than you would see in the animation or that I've seen in the pictures.
Yeah,
But
I think it's also just like it doesn't mean that all parts of the world between worlds are the same, right? Like
mhm.
it is kind of the way I view it. So um it's possible that like she didn't see it the other way because that's not the parts they needed her to see this time, right? So like she's in a different section or whatever, different aisle.
I like it when we don't have 100% answers though, because I
Same.
think one of the biggest problems we have with the internet is we have to know everything. We have to know what everything means, why they made that choice. We can never really think about, oh, that was an interesting choice. Let's have a conversation like you and I are having. It has to be no, there has to be a right and a wrong answer. And I think that's when the conversation gets stupid. I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet after this episode where I'm like, see, this is why we can't have nice things because you're arguing about this after me, you, and Ron, we just all had fun. Like, we're just like, yeah, can we have some more of this? I mean, you're ruining it for yourselves if you get like that. And I think Star Wars is really just fun. I know a lot of people hate it when people say, oh, well, Star Wars is for kids. And kind of is. It's the inner kid inside, but that's not a bad thing in my opinion. I mean, look, I just watched Andor episodes, and that wasn't necessarily the for kids Star Wars, and I enjoyed that. Just, dude, lots of Star Wars. Just chill out a little bit.
Right. Yeah, there's got to be different, we're getting to a point where there's different sections of content for us now, like, but the main focus that George was doing was making these shows and stuff for his kids and for kids, and stuff like that. So I find that this show has gotten that essence completely right. And
Hmm.
I like Andor. I think is one of the highest quality things they've ever done,
Yeah,
and it's like what I would call like the Breaking Bad of this. It's the prestige television of it, and I love it for that. But that's not also like I don't want that all the time. I like having stuff that can deal with like
Yeah.
this mythological stuff, and then when I want to watch like everyday people in Star Wars, there's Andor, right? Like that's kind of what Andor is to me.
Well, so here's the thing. When I'm watching Andor, I kind of go, I can kind of use a little Force stuff intermixed with this serious, awesome Star Wars world. But so I think there's, when you get too far away from the Force for me, I go, I'm kind of craving that because I got all the other elements of Star Wars. But I really like the real world aspect of Andor. What I would say about Ahsoka is it seems like a merge of the prequels and the sequels in terms of tone. And I really enjoy Ahsoka's tone. I think this is what Star Wars really was always trying to be, and I don't think it necessarily hit for everyone in the prequels. It may have achieved it. I kind of have to go back and watch the prequels again because I was like, they're okay. I remember thinking they're okay. I was never enamored the way that you and Ron were with the prequels. And I think that's one of the reasons I didn't dive deeper into Star Wars because it didn't hit with me the way it hit with you. But I'm very interested in what the tone of Star Wars is going to be going forward because I think this is the first time that I said, this is the formula. This is just what it needs to be. And we were talking about for kids stuff. Look, Star Wars should always be accessible to kids, and if it's not, Star Wars did it wrong.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this. I wanted to talk about uh, Darth Maul and why people thought he was going to show up in this. So the Siege of Mandalore, which is the fight that Anakin says he was not a part of, and it's when Ahsoka kind of is running from the first battle into the second battle, and we start to see different stuff going on. And Anakin's like, "What is this? I wasn't part of this battle," and it being the Siege of Mandalore is what Ahsoka calls it. This is the last few episodes of the Clone Wars cartoon, which is taking place at the same time as Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So there's this, like, I really implore anybody that has not watched Clone Wars, if you're going to watch any Clone Wars, those last four of season 7 are tied in heavily with Episode 3 to the point where you even get some of the same scenes from the movie in animation, that kind of tell you, oh, this is happening at the same time as this is happening. The leader of Mandalore at that time was Darth Maul, and this is a battle that Ahsoka does against Darth Maul. But he had a clan of of Mandalorians, which a lot of people started calling these Mauldalorians because they wore these helmets with the Darth
Oh,
Maul
that's
horns
cool.
coming out
That's
of.
cool.
Yes. So this makes an appearance here in the episode. Briefly, you see her fight one of these Mauldalorians, and I was starting to think, oh, maybe we're gonna see that Darth Maul scene, and then no, which I'm fine with. I don't think you need to look. This is what, like, I see some people saying this is like fan service, but I really don't think it is. This is what was needed to tell her story, right? And have her come to terms with what she needs to come to terms with so she can return to the light and uh,
Hmm.
follow the rest of her journey. It would have felt more fan servicey if you did have like Darth Maul show up for a brief second,
And it would have taken the focus off Anakin
Yeah,
and the lesson that Ahsoka learns, which would have been bad storytelling.
exactly. So that's kind of where I stand with this. So I was very happy to see that they kind of stayed away from that, and just kind of focusing on her and him having this conversation through these couple scenes, and then them having that battle where she's kind of seeing the Darth Vader side of him a bit, and then when she wins, he's like, "Hey, you pretty much passed the test." It's kind of the vibe I got from this, and you're ready to go back. And he told her at the beginning, you have a chance to still live because she remembered, right? It kind of seemed like it's because she remembered. He said at first she didn't remember why she was there, and then she was like, oh, the Balin fight, and he said yes, which means you still have a chance to live. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. how long she was in the water. It feels like a long time. I feel like she would be dead if not. So there's part of me that thinks she really did go to the world between worlds and then come back right when Chopper senses that she's there. You know, when he's doing his scan.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I
Because
like
he
that
didn't find
interpretation.
anything first either. You know, he had to keep scanning and then eventually found her. So
So she
that's
was
the vibe I
literally
get.
in
Yeah.
she was literally in the world between worlds, which supports your argument of earlier in the show. So makes sense.
And I just want to show this again. This is the Anakin Skywalker part, and then the Darth Vader view that it flicks between, which I think is just amazing. I really love the way that they did this.
I love that the shadow is so much bigger when Vader's there. If you notice, the light is so much more when Anakin's there, and it's so much darker. The little spotlight is so much smaller when it's Vader. I think that is a really cool attention to detail. I think Star Wars really gets a lot of the attention to detail perfect.
Let's talk about Hayden a little bit, right? He pops up, and when they go to the Clone Wars, he's sporting this little outfit, which may not be recognizable to people that haven't watched the cartoon, but this is his Clone Wars look, where a lot of the Jedi started having armor on them to help protect them. And what does this little chest plate look like? It looks a lot like Darth Vader's, doesn't it? I really
It
like that.
really does.
But it was great just to see it in live action and see like there he is wearing that thing, right? Like I think sometimes people kind of took it as like a stylistic thing for the cartoon, but seeing that he actually wore that now, what this is really helping me do, Chris, is making these characters feel connected. Even though like what I mean there are these iterations of characters. Because there was a time where if I watch the prequels, I have a hard time thinking that Anakin is Darth Vader. You know, like seeing this Anakin from the prequels is the same Darth Vader from the originals. I had trouble with that originally.
So it's merging the characters into one, is what you're saying.
Yes, and then when I watch the Clone Wars and I see a different look, different voice actor, it was hard for me to connect him to the Anakin from the prequels because he is played a little differently. But when you get this scene where he's wearing what he's wearing, he's delivering lines more like Matt Lanter, and he's being more lighthearted than he is in the prequels and he is in the Clone Wars, it's making that stuff feel connected. And then when you get stuff like this, right, it's making it feel even more like the same character on top of the stuff we got in the Obi-Wan show. So for me, these past few years have been really making this stuff work. The same kind of thing with Ahsoka is seeing her in the Clone Wars and Rebels, and then seeing her as Rosario Dawson, who was kind of playing a different Ahsoka because she was so stoic. But then we get Ariana Greenblatt, who's playing young Ahsoka. She also played young Gamora in Infinity War. She nails it, and it's making me feel more and more that this is the same Ahsoka from the cartoon as her, who then grows up to Rosario Dawson Ahsoka, who knocked it out of the park with her scenes with Hayden Christensen. So it's starting to feel more and more cohesive for me.
That's really cool. That's really cool. For me, as a guy who hasn't watched all of that, I just was like, man, they put on a good show. It's been fun. I'm excited to go back and watch all of it. The problem is, I got like 7 seasons of one show and then what, 5 seasons of another?
4. Yeah.
Okay. So it's
7
11
and 4.
seasons of TV to catch up to this moment. It's nothing. Nothing. I can do that in a weekend, maybe. Not really.
And what I would say too is like if you wanted to get the bare bones of it, what I would suggest for people to do is look up like viewing orders online because there are some episodes you can cut out, right? Like I'm not going to BS anyone and say they're all important. There are episodes where it's like a 3 episode arc of Jar Jar not doing important things. So you're like, yeah, you can skip these. I watched every single one. You can skip them if you want to. And then when you're caught up, you can go back if you're really hankering for them and watch some more. But there are certain episodes like that, and I'm not just saying Jar Jar because of Jar Jar, but there's episodes with 3PO and R2 that are like 3 episode arcs that don't actually amount to anything that you can skip. Um, for anybody out there that's wondering, uh, look up like most important Clone War episode, you know, views or storylines, and you'll get the gist of all of them pretty well, because there's some episodes that like our main heroes don't even show up in. But somebody that is a main hero that showed up in this is this clone trooper who was voiced by Tamora Morrison uh, in this episode, but is usually voiced by D. Bradley Baker. It was Captain Rex. So this is the captain of the 501st, which was later going to become Anakin's captain and his command. And these are the troopers you see walk into the temple in Revenge of the Sith with their blue and is part of Vader's fist, as they call him. Well, Rex was not a part of that. He was with Ahsoka. Him and a few others went to join Ahsoka, and they were taking on Darth Maul on Mandalore and stuff. So he was not there for that moment, and he kind of sided with Ahsoka here, and he's kind of been, people keep rumoring that he's going to show up and stuff. We finally got him here. Yes, it was helmet. He wore his helmet, but I don't think they were getting Tamora Morrison on for 5 seconds. They would have. He was busy filming something too, I think. So he probably came in, did some ADR recordings before the strike or whatever, locked it in. But man, it was great to see him, even if it wasn't without the helmet, which I think some people have been kind of upset about. But again, it
You
is
can't
what it
always
is.
get what you want.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
like,
The fact
come on,
he's
guys.
there, he got a poster too. I mean, that's pretty cool. But yeah, he is one of the main clones in the Clone Wars show. So it's nice to see him recognized. He appears in Rebels later, as well as the Bad Batch, which is the latest show on Disney Plus right now. Okay, I feel like we've been all over the place so far. Any questions from you about any of these flashbacks or stuff before we kind of talk about the Hera Jason side of the storyline and post World Between Worlds?
I don't really have any questions. It was more of I'm trying to take notes as I go here. I'm trying to catch them things like I didn't really catch up on Rex and all that stuff, but and I know there's probably people listening to this like, God, I hate this guy. He doesn't know anything, but it's fun. I had a blast with it, and I'm just gonna keep going.
Well, I think it's important to have a point of view to somebody that hasn't watched this stuff, because sometimes I think Star Wars fans, and I mean this with me included, right, get so involved in like the deep minutia, right, of the canon that can make people think that, I've seen a lot of people say, why is this a live action show? Why would they have made a live action show off of a cartoon that some people didn't watch? And this is the story they wanted to tell. We have a live action Ahsoka now from The Mandalorian. This is a way to introduce people to those characters and to these stories. And I honestly think you can watch these 5 episodes without watching the other stuff, and they give you the information. You don't need to know that on Mandalore at this time it was Darth Maul. I'm sharing that information, right? Like, but it's not something in the show that you need to know to be like, I'm lost here. She says it's the siege of Mandalore. That means you know that something's going down on Mandalore and Anakin wasn't there. That's really all you need to know. I think sometimes people think too much with that stuff of like, oh, like they're alluding to stuff I haven't seen, but we see that all the time with like the prequels, with the um originals, right? When they're mentioning stuff like even the sequels, there's times where like Lando's talking about how him and Luke went on missions to hunt down Ochi of Bassoon on, Pasana and stuff. And guess what? That's not referenced anything at the time the movie came out. Now, of course, they made a book that kind of covers that, but at that time it was just like implied history. And I think this show can kind of get away with that too. There's implied history. We've kind of gotten that with Ahsoka and Sabine too. We have no idea about their like master apprentice relationship. That's stuff that even us that watched have no clue about because it happened during this time skip. I just want to share this photo too. I really like this. Not the highest quality I could find, but having Vader, Anakin at some point turn to the red saber as they're fighting too, and getting the Sith eyes. It was just really great stuff. Um, all right, let's talk about like the Hera and Cetos post, um, pretty much post World Between Worlds. I guess there's actually a little bit, yeah, post World Between Worlds. Ahsoka picks up the broken half of the map and does what we call a force sense echo. This is also another reference. I wouldn't say really a reference, but this happens in Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. It's one of the capabilities that your character Cal Kestis can do. What I think of that more of is if Cal can do it, I'm sure a character like Ahsoka, who's more powerful, can certainly do it. So I don't find that as really a reference. It's more of like a power that's been introduced that she's also able to do. Um, and what a force sense echo kind of is it's like picking up an object or going to an area where something happened, and in the game you press a button and you'll hear conversations that led up to the moment that you're studying. And that's almost exactly what happens here with Ahsoka, where she picks up the map, she uses the force, and she can hear that whole entire conversation with Balin. And she hears Sabine give in and go with him. And that gives her enough information to know Sabine's alive, but she's with them. Because there's a certain point here where Huang thinks that both Sabine and Ahsoka are dead or missing when Hera arrives.
That's pretty damn cool. That's all I gotta say about that. That's pretty damn cool. It was almost like Arkham Origins Batman Detective Mode where you can just replay the crime scene, and it's like, wow, this detective mode is cool. So that was the Force can do so many things. It's very interesting, and I really liked the connection that Ahsoka had with Jason in this one, and how excited he was that she was back. I thought everything about that whole scene was pretty awesome. And again, I really like Hu Yang in the show. It's a general note. I like Hu Yang a lot.
Yeah, he's been great. David Tennant's great. Yeah, Hera at first seems to not be really paying attention to Jason saying he hears the sabers, right? But does she hear it too, or does she just buy into him hearing it? Because like he's like, listen, and it sounds like when we hear it. So I wonder if Hera can hear it, or or not. Like maybe Jason's able to kind of present that to her. Maybe she's starting to realize that when he said he wanted to be a Jedi in like the first episode, she was kind of like,
Hmm.
yeah, right? Like,
Hmm.
but I think now she's starting to realize that's a real possibility, right? Like, I don't know if she knew the extent of his force abilities right now, but the fact that he was able to hear that, and Ahsoka even makes note of it. She's like, "Oh, you could hear that?" Right? And he said, "Who were you fighting?" and stuff. I'm thinking maybe at some point she stops training Sabine and starts training Jason. That's something I'm gonna put here as a stamp on it. I think Sabine's journey is gonna make her realize she doesn't want to really be a Jedi. She doesn't really have the Force ability that much. I'm thinking maybe Ahsoka might take up training Jason instead, or he goes to Luke's academy. But I'm thinking there's that connection already between Ahsoka and Jason and the Syndulas. So that's where I'm kind of thinking and leaning towards.
And you kind of want to stay away from Luke's academy, as we've touched on.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't want to end up dead, you're gonna want to stay far away from that until until Rey starts taking over it in Rise of Skywalker or whatever. But yeah, something we want to avoid. But again with Ahsoka, then she comes up with a plan, and it wasn't the map is burned on her hand plan that everyone was thinking about due to Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was instead the most simplest plan. The Purgils. We already know they can get there. We already know they know how to get there. Let's talk to them with the Force, right? And convince them. And the biggest whale allows it and lets them into the mouth. And this is, part of that conversation. Of course, this picture is coming from her talking to him and stuff, but she just seems way more in tune with the Force again. And that is what I'm really digging with Ahsoka the White.
I love the whole "Are you sure they're going to take us where we need to go" thing. Are you sure about this? It was such a good scene, and it's a little Pinocchio going into
Yeah,
the
yeah.
mouth of the yeah. It's just that was pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing the Purgils again. I love the Purgils. I think that is one of my new obsessions with Star Wars is Purgils. They are cool.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they can just travel at light speed, right? Um,
Like when
and
they take off, I'm like, no, no way.
and like you said though too, like when Huang's like, "Are you sure they're gonna take us there?" And she's like, "Not really," but like it's kind of like I gotta believe type of thing, and that's kind of what I feel like she's starting to figure out again. She needs to believe in something. She needs to trust stuff. She was kind of very anti that lately. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? She was very like almost like I can only believe what my eyes are telling me type of person for a bit. And I'm just so thankful that I kind of figured this is where we would be going at some point with her, right? And last week I thought it was going to be maybe Anakin kind of more alluding to the fact that he was always destined to do this. It wasn't her fault, but instead it was more about like her own journey in that world between worlds. And I think she kind of realizes a bit of that, as well as also realizing she has to fight or die. Fight, not really meaning physical fight, but almost like fight for something, fight for life,
Hmm.
right? Like, and having her commit, she was so not committal for a while, right? Like, I'm no Jedi, Hu Yang, and now she's feels more committed. She's back to her old self again, ready
Yeah.
to go find Ezra and to go find Sabine. She's not doing this about Thrawn anymore. Remember the whole time in the first 4 episodes, she's like, we gotta stop Thrawn. Well, she now wants to get there to find her friends, like
Hmm.
Sabine. I'm sure she'll try to stop Thrawn as well, but I think she's turned that corner of, what she is kind of drawing the line in the sand about.
Not to keep going there, but this is basically her faith, Alfred, faith moment. It was her letting go of all the darkness and filling up with optimism and positivity. And positivity changes the way you go about your life. Positivity, I love what you said. It's about Ezra and Sabine now. It's about going there for a good reason and fighting for a reason. I love that. I think that's fantastic. And, you know, we see the power of negativity and the dark side all the time. But I think one of the cool things about Star Wars is, when the good guys win, positivity wins. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and you know, it's just nice. Like I said, it's just nice to see her back to her old self. She's ready to go find her friends. I'm predicting next week. I don't really know where they go next week. I'm thinking, look, we're probably going to see part of Hera's trial, right? We've kind of gotten word from Mon Mothma that they're ready to strip Hera of her general title because of what she's been doing. We get a
Because
nice,
she's right.
yeah, but going AWOL, I guess. But she, uh, she is. They kind of say make sure you bring Ahsoka so she can kind of, you know, volunteer some of this information and maybe help you keep your title. Well, it doesn't seem like Hera cares right now, right? She wants Sabine and Ezra found. She's going to help stall a bit here with uh, Carson Teva and all them when the New Republic comes. Once the New Republic came, they kind of say, hey, Ahsoka's going to be taking these whales, and, that's it. Well, so I'm thinking next week we're going to see part of Hera's trial, which is not going to go well. I think she will be stripped of her title. I think she'll get it all back once we realize
That she was
Thrawn
right.
is Thrawn is here, right? Like,
Yeah, she's right.
yeah, how much proof do they need? Because they have a very high up general in Hera who was here to see that the map was used to go get someone. How much proof do you need that something
Well,
odd is happening?
they kind of keep moving the goalposts on them, and it's unfair because like you have a rescue mission. Like, why do you need to rescue somebody if nothing's going on? Like, how incompetent can you be? I don't understand it. Can I ask
Yeah,
a
yeah,
dumb question?
sure.
I know that Jason's father is force sensitive.
Yes.
Is Hera force sensitive?
No, not that we've known. Um, so it's actually funny. Hera's dad and mom were actually in the Clone Wars cartoon, Cham Syndulla, which is a leader on Ryloth. Um, so Anakin and Ahsoka actually had interactions with Cham Syndulla, who is Hera's um, father. Um, Kanan is Jason's father, and they finally mentioned him, saying Kanan Jarrus was a Jedi. He's the one that trained Ezra, and he also trained Sabine a little bit on how to use a lightsaber for when she had the dark saber. Um, so he kind of sacrificed himself in Rebels near the end of the show. Um, then at that point though, Hera was pregnant. We didn't know it, but once you see Kanan's kid, you're like, okay, yeah, so she was pregnant at that time. So yeah, he's gotten the force abilities from his dad. We don't know how strong they are. I'm waiting for Huyang to tell us, right? I'm almost certain he would love to tell Sabine that Jason is far superior in force abilities than her. I feel like he would get some joy out of that.
This guy isn't even 5 feet tall, and he's got more force sensitivity than you have in your entire body.
Right, right. Um, but no, I'm glad they mentioned him this time, and I would assume that's the most mentions we're probably going to get.
I can see it. I can see it now. Close your eyes. I know where you are, Ahsoka. See? He's so much better than you. It's so stupid.
Right, right. Um, so yeah, they're going to this other galaxy. We'll see where they go from here. I've heard some people speculate that maybe she will find Ezra instead of finding Thrawn, kind of like first, which would be interesting. I'm kind of starting to think that we're not going to see much of Ezra in the rest of these 3 episodes. I think I could be totally wrong here. I'm starting to speculate that there's rumors apparently going around that Ahsoka's getting a second season. I could see them kind of saving Ezra for like a second season. Maybe they just find Thrawn at that point or something. But I'm not really sure where it goes from here. I think it's going to be a sprint though. She doesn't have to defeat Thrawn right now. I think the story kind of ends with Thrawn coming back and then showing the New Republic that there is something, and that'll kind of lead into the Dave Filoni film where he's supposed to tie in a lot of these characters like the Mandalorian and characters from this show and stuff. So that's where I kind of think they're starting to head here. I don't think we will defeat Thrawn in this show. I think that'd be too quick at this point.
I'm interested to see Thrawn. He's blue, right?
Yeah, blue.
So I saw a picture of him. I was like, oh, he's kind of like the Night Walker in Game of Thrones, is what he looks like a little bit. Excuse me. Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find a picture of him from Rebels, because uh, he's blue with like dark blue hair, um, which is uh, which is cool. Now, I'll kind of give people some background on Thrawn here too. He's not an original character to Rebels. He was originally in a book that published in the early '90s called "Heir to the Empire," which is a line that Ahsoka says right about Thrawn, how he's going to be heir to the Empire. And Heir to the Empire was a storyline that's no longer canon, but it was about Thrawn kind of taking up after Palpatine died and becoming kind of like the heir to the Empire. And characters like Han, Luke, and Leia, this is like their first big story after Return of the Jedi, is kind of defeating Thrawn. It was a trilogy. And then they kind of brought him into Rebels, making him canon again, making him a Grand Admiral in the show, which is what he is in the books. And now it's funny because this storyline with Ahsoka and all that is taking place around the same time as Heir to the Empire did, around 5-6 years after Return of the Jedi. Which is why a lot of people think we're kind of getting a new version of Heir to the Empire. But this is what, this is Thrawn from the Rebels cartoon.
So he looks like a dude who's blue.
Yep,
Almost looks like an Incredibles
with
character.
like red eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he is usually like a what's it called, a supposed to be like a brilliant strategist, and he likes, like classical type music. He's voiced by Lars Mikkelsen um in the cartoon, and that is actually who's going to play him here in Ahsoka. They did show him in the trailer, so this is not a spoiler. I'm going to put up a picture of live action Thrawn. You can kind of see the difference between live action Thrawn and Rebels Thrawn.
Okay, that's just scary.
It is, isn't it? Like his red eyes, and that's cartoon Thrawn. Here's live
Like
action Thrawn.
cartoon Thrawn is like the cartoon Thrawn's like, hello, give me a thing of tea. And this
Yes,
Thrawn is like, give me your firstborn child.
yeah, he's a little scarier in real
Hmm.
life. I kind of, it's something that could have came out looking a little, what was I gonna say, a little cheesy, but it actually looks really great. Looks really
Yeah,
great.
they really made that look scary and intimidating. Almost a Voldemort look. Like
Yes.
it's like this guy means business and you are in trouble.
All right. Well, I think that is most of the episode here. So they're going to the other galaxy. We'll see what happens next week. We're gonna get Ron is supposed to join us next week. He's gonna share for the first few minutes of next week's episode his thoughts on this episode, and what it what it meant to him, and stuff like that. And so we'll get into that next week.
I'll
But
bring the force tissues.
I'm really excited to see where the show goes from here, because what I've heard from people that have, I guess, seen it, I don't know, that the first five were like a lot of buildup, with five being like the big story one, and then the last three being a roller coaster, like speed to the finish. So really excited to see if that's actually what happens, because I think there's a lot of stuff they still got to cover in this show with 3 episodes left. But
That's why
really
we're
looking
getting
forward
to
to it.
season two, right?
Yeah, that's the
If we
rumor.
do indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, if not a season two, I think some of this stuff, definitely be carried over into the movie Dave Filoni is supposed to make. But
So
for
so
that
if
to
we go
happen,
to so if we go to the next galaxy, is that still a galaxy far, far away, or is that far, far, far away?
it might be
Or
slightly closer. It might be a galaxy not as far away.
in a galaxy not as far as away? That would be hilarious. It's like, hey, the Milky Way is our neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm really excited to see what do you think we even see of this galaxy. I'm assuming not much. I'm assuming we see like space and like
I I'd say
that's it.
space and a planet.
Maybe one planet. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I'm probably going with too.
space and a planet, and they'll probably mention like three planets and show you one planet.
Yeah, they might. Yeah, I've heard rumors that this one is another like 45, 50-minute episode, which would be great.
Yes, I think that's kind of the sweet spot. But we were talking earlier that the heavy action will be shorter and the
Yeah,
more dialogue and story will be longer. I think the sweet spot is 45 minutes because I think you get a good bit of both in that way.
yeah. All right. Well, if you want to give us a follow or rate and review us and all that stuff on iTunes and Spotify, you can do that. If you want to follow us anywhere, we're on all platforms with @podawakens. Chris and I have been doing our DC podcast, which is called Elseworlds, a DC fan podcast, and that is at Elseworlds DC fan on all of our socials. And this week we recorded an episode about drafting, well, not really drafting, but picking a football teams based off of DC heroes and villains. And we come up with our own team names and logo concepts and all that. And that episode will be dropping on Saturday. So you can catch that over on Elseworlds. Thank you all for watching and listening along with us this week. We will be back next week to talk about episode 6 of Ahsoka.